Let's talk about SBLOCs. These are securities-backed lines of credit, SBLOC. I'm Jessica Lanning. I am a certified financial planner. I run an independent financial planning firm based out of San Francisco. And I help my clients manage money as one of the many things that I do for them. And when I look at their overall portfolios, I am often looking to make sure that their non-retirement accounts have an SBLOC on them, a securities-backed line of credit. What this is a line of credit, kind of like you would have on your house. That's a home equity line of credit. This is a securities-backed line of credit. And what this thing does is it allows you to borrow money against the stocks that you have at that particular institution. And depending on how much risk you're taking in those stocks will determine how much you can borrow in those stocks, and how much you borrow then determines what the interest rate is going to be. So you'll look into all of those things. It works very much like a HELOC. It's just called an SBLOC. And instead of it being on your house, it's on your securities over at your institution. And I want all of my clients who have non-retirement accounts with me to have one of those. And here's why. First of all, this line of credit never shows up on a credit report, generally speaking. Now, when there's an inquiry made about whether or not the SBLOC should be issued, there will be an inquiry on the credit report that falls off in about 90 days or less. I don't worry about that. But if a client does borrow money against that SBLOC, generally speaking, does not show up on a credit report. So if they have to apply for other debt elsewhere, that balance on that SBLOC generally doesn't impact that lending decision elsewhere. Oftentimes, also, minimum payments don't need to be made on an SBLOC. That interest can accrue over time. And the best part about the SBLOC is, let's say you need $50,000 to buy a car. Well, you could liquidate all those stocks. And I can already hear you, Apple and NVIDIA people going, oh my God, sell my Apple stock to buy a car? You have to be kidding me. I know you don't want to sell those things. I know you might have a highly concentrated stock position, which we can talk about at another time. But what an SBLOC does is it allows you to borrow money against those stocks and not have to sell them. Go ahead and buy the car and then be able to manage your cash flow this way. So a lot of financial planning is not only about, tax management and investment management, but it's also debt management. How do you borrow money in a smart, strategic way that is going to benefit your cash flow, benefit your investments, and benefit your overall financial well-being many, many years down the line? And having an SBLOC is one of those things. To me, it is almost like having a reserve account. It is another way for you to be able to access money should you need it in a very short period of time. Now, it does have some downsides. If those investments get too low, there can be what's called a margin call. They will ask for those stocks to be sold to pay off the debt. But most of the time, first of all, clients are borrowing all the money that they can on those particular investments or on that SBLOC so that the risk is relatively low. And the institutions don't want to do this either. They're not after your securities. They want you to keep them there as well. And so they're not only going to allow you to borrow, but so much. So it really lowers the risk that that's actually going to happen, but it is a risk. And if you are not making minimum monthly payments, that balance is growing, and then you have to have a conversation about whether or not that's the smartest thing to do as well. But more often than not, I'm looking at withdrawals from SBLOCs as really being a short-term measure to get people through a particular phase of their life. We're using that debt very strategically, and that's why it becomes such a great asset to a client. I know having a debt out there doesn't necessarily feel like an asset, but it is a huge benefit to them, let's put it that way, so that they can, again, manage their financial well-being in a way that suits them best. So if you do not have an SBLOC and you do have non-retirement accounts up on a brokerage account, you should look into getting one. I highly recommend it. And of course, always talk to your tax and financial planning professionals about whether or not this is a good idea for you. I'm Jessica Lanning. Lanning does planning.